Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I feel incredibly honored to be sitting with these three artists who are amongst the most, I would say, successful, influential artists working today. First is Tony Abeyta. Yep. Thomas Breeze Marcus. And Melissa Cody. Today is Melissa's birthday.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone.
So the format for today's panel discussion is we're going to be talking for about 45 minutes, and then we're going to turn it over to you to ask any questions that you have of the artist. The first question I'm going to ask of each of you, and I'm going to start with Melissa. When did you start making art, and why?
Hi, everyone. Before I answer your question, I just wanted to introduce myself really quick in my native language, Navajo, from the Western Agency of the Navajo Reservation. Yat she Melissa Cody Nishya, Tkapahan Nishlan, Hashkan Zo, Bashichin, Sitna Jenny Dashache, Do Nakai Diné Dashanella. And I wanted to introduce myself first, just in case there were any extended clan relatives here with us today, and also to acknowledge all of the women within our family, because we're a matrilineal, matriarchal culture, and I just wanted to start off with that. I started weaving when I was 5 years old. I grew up on the reservation. I learned from my mother, Lola S. Cody, who is also a very accomplished weaver. And I also learned from my grandmother, Martha Gorman Schultz, who actually just passed away a few weeks ago at the age of 93, the matriarch of our family. And I also learned from my extended relatives, my aunties, learning from my cousins, and also my siblings. I have an older brother and two sisters. So, we're a family of, 4 or 5 generations of weavers. So that's how I learned to weave, was from my mother at the age of 5.
Thank you. Breeze, how about you? When did you start making art, and why?
I've been making art since I was a child, like many of us. I also grew up in a family of artists. I'm an enrolled member of the Tony Abeyta Nation by way of the Salt River community just south of here. I'm also a Ponca and Oto from Oklahoma. I grew up around a Ponca grandmother who was big on beadwork and was also a seamstress. And myself, I personally grew up in the city of Phoenix by way of the Salt River community. And I experienced graffiti art, street art, muralism at a young age, and really took to that, and it nurtured me at a time when I needed it most, when most adolescents need that, and really set the path for me. And since then, have worked a lot within my community. I've done a lot of public murals around locally and nationally, and soon to be internationally. And I'm just really excited to be here and have this conversation.
Thank you. Tony?
I find my mic here. I'm Tony Abeyta. I'm also a Navajo and born and raised in Gallup, New Mexico. I live in Santa Fe and Berkeley, California. When did I first start doing art? Well, I can't really remember, because I've always done art. My mother was a craftsperson. She did weaving, she did woodwork, she did ceramics. She was really a creative person that just really, art was very familiar. My father was a renowned traditional Indian painter from the Dorothy Dunn School of Painting. Many of his works are in museum institutions. So I grew up with my dad painting, my mom. We always had clay. We always had, there was always wool being dyed. There was always, different kinds of woods from all over, the world. They're probably illegal now, like ebony and rosewoods and things. But we had that stuff in a small place of Gallup, New Mexico. So there was this really great opportunity to make stuff from the scraps that my mom would be making things from. I would sand them and glue them all together, and I was always doing something creative. I didn't want to be an artist. It just kind of fell into my lap. I worked in movie theaters. I used to be projectionist, union projectionist, and I toured tickets, and I made popcorn. And I realized I didn't want to do that for the rest of my life, so I took a chance and went to art school at the Institute of American Indian Arts. And that's really where art began for me.
Thank you. You mentioned family influences. I've not yet been to your booth, but I know that you're exploring mid-century and modernist influences. Could you talk a little bit about some of those influences on your practice?
Well, yeah, so it all goes back to learning about the aesthetics of creativity. Like, how did people make things? Why did they make it? What were the conceptual, foundations of art movements? And so it was always, I have to give a lot of shine to my mom because she always had books. She had really amazing books that you couldn't even find in the bookstores. Again, I lived in not only a food desert in Gallup, New Mexico, but it lacked art and art galleries and things. But my mom had books about, Bauhaus kind of stuff. She had books on woodworking. She had books on artists and painters and anthropological studies of the Southwest. And so I grew up around resources like a library, right? So there was always this opportunity to find, why do we create? And so what were the movements and the periods and the regionalism and the cultural foundations for creativity? So much had to do with vernacular. So I've got a booth here, and if you get a chance, go and see it. But that talks about this vernacular. It talks about art in the 50s, 60s, and 70s in the desert. So I hand the mic over to somebody else, but most I know about that.
All right, thanks, Tony. Bruce, how about you? Who are some of the influences on your practice?
So many of the influences that I grew up around were those not just within the family, but it was also the people that I painted with in the streets in the city of Phoenix, who many of them also have gone on to have great careers as mural painters and fine artists themselves. A really good friend of mine who passed away recently, Pablo Luna, as well as Miles McGregor, who goes by El Mac, who is an international mural painter himself. Really amazing individuals. So those close to me had a very heavy influence on me. And we really pushed each other in that way. And I think you need that and have that honesty and to be able to critique one another, to have that drive and to really influence each other. Aside from that world, really the long-standing history of my ancestry here in the valley, being Autumn, and being here in Scottsdale. I'm sure not many people know this, and I'll just kind of drop this, but we have a name for this. The area of Scottsdale is we have a name for the area of Phoenix. The area of Scottsdale is Vashai Shavashon, and it translates to decayed grass. And we have names for all these spaces and places around here because this is our ancestral lands. And speaking of ancestral lands, the other influences are the older history of not only pottery making, but petroglyph and mark making, like you can find around the mountain ranges here. So for me, it's almost like a continuum of that by creating these messages and communicating and narratives by painting public art, public murals within the city of Phoenix and elsewhere. Also while tying in cultural relevance to where we are. And not necessarily so much a, I guess, reclamation, but more of a proclamation that we'll always be here. And also aside from that, I mean, I also love large scale, maybe not necessarily murals, but the French Romanticism period. You know, one of my favorite paintings is Raft of the Medusa by Theodore Géricault, 1818, 1819. It's a beautiful painting, and I think it's like 16 by 22 feet or something. Those are some of the influences, and I still think about them a lot. I think about my friends who are here and who are not here, and just a very, very heavy influence.
Thanks, Bruce. Melissa, we know that some of your influences included your family members, your grandmother who just passed away. I'm sorry about that. She was a great lady. But who do you make your art for?
I think every artist makes art for themselves, at the root of it. I use art, I spend so much time with my work. My work takes weeks to months to years to make one piece. And to be so, intimately involved with the work, it has to be reflective of, your own wants, needs, and also, therapies almost, because, when you're sitting at the loom, you're are constantly, there by yourself alone. So you have to be able to sit there with your thoughts and to run through all of these, ideas and visions and conversations, whether you're having conversations, relaying of something that happened, years ago or something that's in the now. I think those conversations are always going to be reflective in the work that, comes off of my loom personally. So, I do make art for myself. Yeah, and, and again, with my grandmother's passing, that's going to influence my work from today on. The work is going to change, the vision is going to change, the emotion, and also, what story am I going to tell? Because I really make sure that the work that I create is reflective of, where I am now. And I think that's what's appealing to a lot of, upcoming weavers, is that it is reflective of a current story and that our traditions are constantly being created. What I'm creating now, will someday, 50, 100 years be considered tradition. So, we're fluid people who are constantly evolving, and that's what, is coming off of the loom today.
For some of you who might not be familiar with Melissa's textiles, they're extraordinarily masterful in their use of design and color and complexity. But I've noticed that recently you've started engaging with technology in the production of textiles. Could you talk about that just a little bit?
Well, I'm 42 today. So I grew up in, the 80s and 90s with the influx of technology, whether it be video games, Atari, the first Nintendos, the first cell phones, the first internet version. And so I've actually been pretty lucky to see this, this evolving of technology and where we are today. But I also like to, pay homage to that in a lot of my work. So you'll see a lot of pixelizations or things that look very digitized. And in the last 2 years, I've actually been working with Jacquard digital weaving. And so that's taking the idea of this digital age into the new era. And a great thing about the Jacquard digital weavings that are woven on a digital loom is that the technology was created by a woman. So it's taking the numbers and geometry that I use to figure out my own personal designs as I'm sitting at the loom, and it's bringing that, same geometry to the woven Jacquard looms.
Fantastic, thank you. Breeze, you mentioned that you're a muralist. Much of the art that you create is for the public, but you also create canvases that hang in, amongst other places, the Heard Museum. Could you tell me a little bit about if there are any differences in your approach to creating a public work of art versus a canvas that might hang in someone's home or in a museum?
Absolutely. There's a huge difference, obviously in scale and the approach, the adjustments that we have to make, the different mediums. Most of my public art is exterior, and because of the medium that I grew up with, I do work a lot in aerosol, and we did do an aerosol mural at the Heard in 2014 during the fair. And a lot of the work that I do small scale is mixed media, acrylic, oil-based inks, and it's just a completely different approach. And the evolution of it is interesting to really navigate through, and trying to find different ways to utilize those different tools, but also how to find sort of that middle ground, because they are completely different. And even the piece that I'm working on currently here at the fair, after the talk, below the flag over there, it's sort of a weird in-between piece, because it's a large-scale canvas, and it's technically not necessarily, I wouldn't necessarily consider it a mural. It's more of a large studio painting, bigger than I would normally work on, but much smaller than a mural that I would work on. So there's a lot of adjustment, and I feel the challenges are great though. I mean, even my most recently completed mural down the street in Old Town, which is at the Western Spirit Museum, of 1,500 square foot, over a 50-foot drop over a stairwell. That took some maneuvering too. That took like 3 different scaffoldings, hydraulic lift equipment, and we got it done, or I should say I got it done. But that approach in itself, being indoors, a permanent fixture now, a permanent in the collection, on the wall, couldn't be done in aerosol, especially not during open hours for the museum. We don't want everybody walking around high, so so I had to adjust that, and I had to do it all in acrylic. And it's the first acrylic mural I had done in 10 years since my interior mural at Smoka. So it's just a lot of back and forth, and it's never really quite the same piece or approach, but I love it, and I wouldn't want to be doing anything else.
Thank you. So this next question, I'd like all 3 of you to answer. Tony, I'm going to start with you. There was an article that came out last year on Bloomberg News that said the market for contemporary Indigenous art was up 1,000% in 3 years. A lot of momentum, a lot of excitement about this market. Tony, what are the advantages and disadvantages of a hot market?
It's actually a challenging question because really the answer is, yeah, it's all great. The market is going up. I'd like to say that I always saw it happening. I knew it was inevitable. From the very beginning, because I saw the work was deep, rich, and meaningful in content. It was tied to Indigenous, source, coming from a place of tradition, coming from, this, rich tradition of creativity, but it was entering into a mainstream way of thinking about current topics of, everything from global climate change to urbanity. So many of the contemporary artists are dealing with the past, but bringing it into the here and the now. And that is great. I knew that was going to happen. And I've watched this market change and evolve tremendously in about the past 5 years. People say, oh, well, maybe it was 6 or 7 years ago, but really where it skyrocketed, where artists, it's you begin to see artists hit over the $1 million mark, Native American artists, whether they're deceased or.
And why does the $1 million mark matter?
Yeah, that's a good question. I talked to a friend of mine about that. I think we shouldn't have to convince the marketplace that Native American art holds the value against anything else out there in the global art world, right? Like you really shouldn't have to, answer the fact that it is as pertinent and valuable to the larger conversation. But I also like to go backwards. I want to revisit all of the artists that have been here, that people like Oscar Howe and people like George Morrison, they've been here, they struggled throughout their lives. They didn't make any money. And so now they are, and it shouldn't be that way. That really probably sucks for the artist who struggled and said, someday when it's, after I'm gone, it'll be worth something. So it's nice to see artists like, I just sold out my show. They were all $350,000 each. There were 10 paintings. It's amazing what's happening right now. And if you don't follow Native American contemporary art, there's some powerhouses that are, people like Jeffrey Gibson and people like Kent Monkman and certainly, and these are all living artists who are reaping the benefits of it, who probably can go out tomorrow and buy a boat. And so I like that. I think that's fantastic. That's the advantage. Now, what are the disadvantages of it? It enters us into this place where the market is temperamental. And so people assume that somehow that this market, it'll, ebb and flow and it'll change and it'll develop. And it's bringing a lot of the top 5, top 10 artists like cream to the top of the milk, right? But what about the next generation of artists? It has to bring all of us up with it. And I love, I had a conversation with Edgar Heepeberts, and he says, you got to have a situation where you open the door and you leave the door open so that younger artists can enter in with the heavy hitters. If you have the top 10, You saw it in Afro-American art. You saw Kerry James Marshall and Kara Walker and a host of people who were bringing in top dollar, multi-millions of dollars. And then it kind of fell off, and all the next generation of artists didn't get that opportunity. And I don't want to see that happen with contemporary American Indian art. There's too much good work that's gestating, that's just still, and everybody's chasing down, you know, the top five. I want a Fritz Shoulder. Everybody's looking for a Fritz Shoulder. And I'm like, man, what about a Breeze Marcus? What about, you know, all of this other, you know, younger generation of people who are still doing amazing work that needs to be able to get that shine. We have to leave the door open. We have to allow people to have that shine. We definitely need to keep our eyes on the younger generation, which is coming up. So that's...
Thank you, Tony. Yeah. Melissa, I want to ask you the same question. I imagine that one of the challenges you must face is meeting demand for your work. It takes a long time to weave a textile. Mm-hmm. But tell me, what are the advantages and disadvantages from your perspective of this hot market that we're in?
Well, I think Tony put it, you know, wonderfully. But, you know, specifically from the textile perspective, again, it's about meeting, you know, meeting the deadlines and trying to keep up and keep pace with, you know, with the inquiries that I get. So that's a good problem to have. You know, I can't complain about that, but that also brings into the conversation of, you know, you have, you know, an artist like myself who creates each individual piece 100% from start to finish. And then you can look at another artist who has, you know, a team of people working behind them. And, you know, is there a double standard for Navajo textile weavers because it's, you know, meant to be 100% done by one weaver? I don't know. You know, that can go into a larger conversation, and it varies from weaver to weaver. I mean, you have guilds of weavers who weave as a team, and you have, you know, solitary artists who prefer to work alone. So again, you know, there's a whole conversation that can go off into that tangent, but, you know, as a textile artist, it's just about keeping up with demand, you know, and trying to not, you know, overwhelm myself with projects that, you know, seem like I'll never finish them, because, you know, I can work small in, you know, 2 or 3 feet, and then I also work up to 9, 10 feet tall. So again, it's just about, you know, gauging my own pace and trying to keep up.
Let's just have a bit of that conversation. Obviously, every artist has their own approach. I'm guessing that you're alluding to certain artists who have teams of people who help them create the final product, mm-hmm. Whether it's ceramics or paintings. What is your feeling about that?
Like I said, it's an individual, you know, decision for each artist. But, you know, myself, just the ideas and the fluidity of the patterning that I make, it would be impossible for me to have somebody work side by side, because, you know, as Navajo weavers, we don't draw anything out. I don't work from an image. I don't work from a drawing. So when I'm sitting at the loom, I'm creating in the moment, that exact moment where I'm counting each string, where I'm laying down each weft. So it's, you know, for me, it wouldn't be a system that would work, just because the ideas wouldn't, you know, come from my head into the loom exactly how I would want it. And Navajo weaving is so detail oriented that it would just be impossible for me to do that.
Thank you. And Breeze, I want to put the question to you. Living here, I see your work all the time. I see it in museums and galleries and driving to work. And what's it been like for you these past, you know, several years with this strong market?
Well, so for me, it's a little different, because I am dabbling, and I think the mural market specifically is completely different than what we're discussing. But just to touch on that for a second, I was looking at sort of stepping out of the mural world for a bit, maybe 10 years ago, because there wasn't quite specifically for mural making a market for it. And as we all know, the popularity has skyrocketed in the last 10 years in this sort of new revised definition of what mural making is, and aesthetically and everything else, and it's exploded. And as far as that goes, it's been really great. For that specifically, I know I can't even keep up with the mural artists locally in Phoenix. There's so many. There's new ones that pop up every day. It feels like. Whereas 20 years ago, there was maybe a dozen of us, and we all knew each other, and we would be amazed if somebody got some sort of grant or something for a big, huge public art project. But nowadays, it's like hotcakes, and it happens over and over again. And I'm grateful to have several projects in that world lined up, as well as my studio practice and commission works for that. But to see that grow, it's great. And even though it's a little different than what Melissa and Tony were discussing and where we're going, but some of the downsides for the mural making specifically, I feel like it gets oversaturated, and I think the work and the quality kind of suffers as well. And not only that, but I think, what are people saying with it? What's really going on the wall? Is there a strong message or narrative, or is it just beautiful color? Nothing wrong with beautiful color. How much substance is in there? And even for the individuals that I work with, Dwayne Manuel, Douglas Miles, a handful of others, there's some strong messaging in that. And I think that's the power of mural making and public art, especially coming from our communities, whether it's Salt River, Navajo Nation, Tohono O'odham, San Carlos Apache. It's just interesting to watch, but as far as the other side of it, I'm grateful. I'm very happy to have work in the Herd Museum, other institutions, other collectors, and it has been noticeably better in the last, for me, being, I think, a lot younger in this than, newer to it, I would say, than, say, Tony, who's well experienced. I'm very appreciative of it, and I can only strive to be better for the next time and the next day, and continue to sharpen the skill set. And I think with all of that, it's amazing to see, but I'm sure there's always going to be pros and cons with everything.
Thank you. So, Tony, when did you know that you could make a living as an artist?
Yes. Well, yeah, I make a living doing art. I think it's an immense privilege to be able to do that, and it was really enabled by the generation that came before me. You know, they worked to establish not only Native American art galleries, and there was the early beginnings and seminal and, you know, gallery dealers like Gallery 10 at the very beginning, and, you know, they were galleries that started, you know, Lane Horwich, who's in Santa Fe and later moved here. So there were a lot of people that came before me. I quit that job and took a chance to go to art school, and I remember my boss telling me, "You're never going to make a living being an artist." And I said, "You're right, but I don't want to work here." I can't do this. I couldn't get the smell of popcorn off of me. And I went to Santa Fe, and I saw that, I always tell the same story when I do this, because it's so true. I went to this exhibition at the Fine Arts Museum in Santa Fe, and it was a survey exhibition of contemporary American Indian painters. In this exhibition was Fritz. There was Harry Fonseca. There was Benny Buffalo. There were all of these students that came out of the Institute of American Indian Arts, and they were this, like, you know, Fritz had a, you know, painting of a buffalo dancer eating an ice cream cone, and then there was all of these other artists, you know, like the Fonseca had glitter on it, you know, glued on there, and I was thinking in bright pinks, and it was crazy, and I was like, these guys went to the same school that I'm going to. I want to be like them. I can do this. I can actually be an artist. And somehow it was those people that came before me who gave me the courage to believe that it's possible. Like that, people don't realize the weight that we have as individual artists, even though we think as one artist, it doesn't really make a change or difference on the next generation. But actually it does, because people see us and see us, you know, shit, driving a Porsche or something, and then they think, shit, I want to be like that. I want to do that. I can. And that's what we really need, is we really need, you know, part of it is how can we become role models? How do we become somebody's art hero? I mean, it's amazing. I look at my art heroes today, and they're my peers and they're my friends, and I just so like, it gives me like, I think, man, I'm really fortunate to be living at the same time that these artists are doing some of the most amazing art in the history of American Indian art. And one of them sitting over here, like Melissa, like I look at Melissa's weavings and I'm like, oh, I just saw one in a museum in Berkeley. I was there and it was like big and amazing. It's moving, and it's just like I see Breeze's murals and I see all that amazing lattice work that's like got my eyes bouncing all over. And then yet somehow when I step back from it, I just see how calm and peaceful, and it reminds me of what this desert feels like when it's not infiltrated with all of the real estate and all of the big boxes and all of the traffic and everything. And I can actually see up close, it feels like it's urban, it feels like it's crazy. And then stepping back, I actually get to witness like, nah man, the desert's still here. I don't know how I got here, being an artist, doing what I do, with the privileges of saying that my hobbies are doing curatorial projects that I just do out of passion because I love doing what I do. But it wasn't my doing. I think it was really a community of people who gave me courage, gave me like this confidence, because I was kind of broken. I come from this like small town that said, no, you can't, no, you can't, no, you won't, give up. This is like some dream thing that you got going here. And I never would have expected, I never would have imagined that I would be able to do what I do. I really wouldn't have. And how that happened was beyond me. Yeah.
Well, Tony, I think I speak for all of us. We're glad you pursued your dream.
Yeah, thanks.
Yes, that it's worked out. Melissa, you are engaged in a traditional cultural practice, weaving. What does that mean in a contemporary context to you?
Being a weaver in a contemporary context, again, it's telling the story of the current day weaver. You know, I grew up on the reservation. I myself went to the Institute of American Indian Arts like Tony. When I went, I was actually a studio arts major, and then I picked up museum studies. So that's what my BA is in museum studies. I had, you know, this quote from my mom in the back of my head was, I don't want to be creatively taxed all the time. I want to you know, go to my 9-to-5 and then have weaving to come home to as a passion. And so that stuck with me for a really long time and kind of molded where I was going with my schooling at IA. But, you know, there came a point when I did want to be creatively taxed because I had all of these ideas and I had all of these, you know, grand visions of what I could do on the loom. And so that's when I quit my 9-to-5 and moved back to the reservation, set up a, you know, small home studio, and just tried to, you know, live in the moment of where I was then. And, you know, when I create my work, I always want to be my own worst critique. You know, I want to be able to look at the work, you know, at its bare bones, technically, logistically, creatively, and then, you know, how is the viewer going to see my work? And so I think that vision and that eye is seen in a lot of contemporary weavers today. You know, when weaving first came about as, you know, mainly utilitarian, you know, as, you know, wearables to keep us warm, household items around the hogan, or, you know, blankets for our horses. There was always a purpose, and I think, you know, now with the work that I create, the purpose is projecting, you know, the art form to continue from the now into the future. and where, like Tony was saying, the door is open for the next generation. And I think that, that critiquing eye is what is fueling a lot of weavers today, is being able to look introspectively, not only who they are as individuals and how they revolve around, urban settings or, traditional, settings within the culture or within their own families. A lot of those stories are being told, and they're being told by work that is coming off of the loom.
Thank you. Breeze, what could gallerists, curators, collectors be doing to help maintain this momentum in the market and to keep elevating Indigenous artistic practices?
Collecting the work. And also giving a platform to show these individuals who are making the work, who are actively working nonstop, pushing the bar, pushing each other, everything that both Tony and Melissa described, really listening to what is happening now. And although our histories are important, absolutely, really taking the time to study and find those individuals who may not have had that platform yet. I take it upon myself to really push artists from my own communities, from the Salt River community, Gila River, Tohono O'odham Nation. I had a conversation many years ago with a gallerist who had asked me, how come there aren't more Tohono O'odham contemporary artists? And my answer to him was, well, there are plenty. They just haven't been given the right opportunity or haven't been in the right spaces yet. And I think that that still is true even 20 years later, that those individuals are there actively making the work, trying to push the bar, trying to get better and be a great practitioner of their own craft. And a handful of individuals that I think of my own, I again encourage them the same way Tony talks about encouraging others, and how we understand that next generation is very important. And I might sound like I'm just repeating just following up of the earlier conversation, but it really is. I think that is one of the most important things, on top of collecting the work as well.
I want to give a plug for an exhibition that's about to open at the Herb. It's a retrospective about houses. And he frequently talks about the sense of responsibility that he has to think 6 generations ahead. That kind of commitment to the future. That's so important. I want to be mindful of time. I want the audience to have a chance to ask any questions that you might have of these 3 great artists. Oh, yes. Oh, we've got a mic for you.
2 questions. Is your first mural still intact? And second question, do you have to maintain a sense of detachment to your pieces? Because Phoenix always changes and murals come and go. And I know I get sad when I see something I like disappear. So how does that make you feel when it happens to you?
Great question. As far as first mural, it's hard to say. Probably not. I go back as far as my first graffiti pieces. Definitely those are gone. And the nature of graffiti itself is ephemeral. It does not last. And coming out of that world, when we were running around in the streets here in Phoenix and other big cities, we knew that was temporary work. And we were doing it for our own reasons, and kind of the same way Melissa was sharing how it was this very therapeutic process. It was also our voice, though, too. And we knew that, not to get into too much detail, but I can think of one piece I did many years ago. It was an illegal piece, and it was on one of the freeways. I won't say where. I spent probably 8 hours in the middle of the night painting it, and I tried to go back in the morning after getting a couple hours sleep to get a photo. And this was the days of before phones, cell phones, literally disposable camera. Went back 3 hours later and had already been painted over. And it was like a kick in the gut, and it was a massive piece. It was probably the size of this wall back here. So you learn detachment early as a graffiti artist or a graffiti writer. Now, when it comes to murals, I understand that I don't have this detachment, or I don't have an attachment to it. However, I treat it almost in the same way of like a prayer, like a sand painting or something. Whereas I always think of, and forgive me, both of you, I'm unfamiliar with the details of the Diné sand paintings, but I always think of the Tibetan sand paintings and the mandalas and how they are created with a purpose, only to be destroyed. And I feel like public murals, exterior, do have a shelf life, especially here in the valley. The sun, the sun is going to eat up everything. So yes, a detachment, but it's also more of a how to approach it in the best way and leaving it sort of a gift to the people.
Thank you. I believe you had a question.
Melissa, your colleagues have kindly mentioned where we can find their works here at the fair. Where can we find yours?
Well, I actually have a book, a catalog that came out with the last two exhibitions I had. I had it's not a retrospective, but a large survey from when I was 5 years old all the way till now. It was originally opened at the Museum of Art in Sao Paulo. My solo exhibition there. It's a catalog called Melissa Cody Webbed Skies, and it's at artbooks.com if you want to find it. It's in English and Portuguese, so if any of you guys speak Portuguese and can read it, it's available for you. But that exhibition traveled to PS1 MoMA in New York City, and yeah, so I'm showing in galleries, I'm showing in museums. I'm currently working on a large 9-foot textile, so I'm in my studio a lot right now, but I will be traveling to Dallas for the fiber art exhibition that's opening on April 11th, and that's at Dallas Contemporary.
Did I see Jim Smith?
I'm wondering if any of you've talked about your inspiration being family, location that you live in, but have any of you been inspired by things from outside the United States, people, places, structure?
I can go first. Yeah, I do actually. I get really influenced by travels. I usually like to take my family with me at every opportunity I can. When I went to Sao Paulo for the opening, I took my son, who was about 5 months old at the time. So I do take a lot of inspiration from just, the world around me, especially like geometrics. I'm really attached to texture and then trying to translate those textures into woven formats. So I'm constantly taking, sample pictures and re-referencing them and trying to weave them in my textiles. So definitely I do get a lot of outside inspirations.
Tony, Breeze, sorry.
I would say definitely within the graffiti and street art world, now with so much accessibility to view everything just on your phone. Even before that era, though, of phones and technology and the web, reading books of other graffiti artists from the subway writing movement of the 1970s. That was a huge influence on me. And most people think of graffiti out of New York, they think of Keith Haring and Basquiat. However, there were probably 1,000 other unsung heroes and unknown names who were part of that movement, heavily painting all the time. And even back on the West Coast, one artist in particular, his name is Chaz Bojorquez, and he's from Los Angeles and has a very beautiful calligraphy style, but is influenced heavily from the urban culture of Chicano culture and gang writing. But he's transformed it into this beautiful, masterful art form. And even listening to him and reading about him 30 years ago, talking about how he was influenced by what was around him, but also Asian calligraphy. And that struck a chord with me because I also had a art teacher who not only was a drawing instructor, he himself was from Beijing, and he taught me Chinese calligraphy, so just connecting the dots. Definitely many influences just outside of culture and community.
Tony, I think the first time I met you, and I don't want to say how long ago it was, but it was a long time ago. It was at lunch in Taos, and I think you had just done a fellowship or a program in Italy. What did you discover about the universal qualities of your practice from being abroad and having that kind of perspective?
You know, it's valuable even domestically as well as going abroad, or traveling is always going to enrich, you know, your perception about mankind, history. You know, like you go to Italy and you see that, you know, these towns and villages are 3,000 and 4,000 years old, and you go to Hopi and you realize that that's, you know, 3,000 and 4,000 years old, but the way people see the world and how they interact with the landscape, animals, cosmos, mythologies of the underworld, all of these things are part of, you know, the stimulus for art. And yeah, like I guess there's things that I experienced, you know, like going to Iceland, and that landscape is so, it comes up in my dreams. I see these torrential rivers, and I see the cold and the black tiny pebbles on the beach, and these big, huge, giant icebergs that are melting, you know, like these glaciers are melting. They're floating out in the ocean, and the sun's setting at, you know, 10 o'clock in the morning. There's these visual stains and imprints that come from those experiences. Going to Japan, you know, and like looking at how they honor, like when a tree falls, in the moss grows on it, they just leave it alone. It's part of the landscape of the garden and the aesthetics of, like, they're the way they think about it, like that stains in your consciousness. So all of these places, but you can also just drive out here in the middle of the desert and just sit and look at insects and birds and, you know, like wait for the sunset and say, ah, and then it begins with, you know, stars. You know, so like everything is stimulus, everything matters, no matter where you go. But there's all these places that I want to go in and see and experience, but I like just being at home sometimes. Like I like a road trip, go to Canyon de Chelly, and, you know, I don't know, maybe it was 7 years ago I'm there, and there's this huge thunderstorm, and there's lightning happening all around there, and I could hear it go through the canyon and just echoing, kaboom, 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 kaboom. And then that somewhere in my paintings, that memory is imprinted, and it goes right into like the artwork, and it could be 12 years old, and like that memory's still vital and current. Like I take it all in and I put it in, like, you know how people keep sketchbooks? I like this sketchbook in my head, and I reference it all the time, and it comes out. And like I went to Alaska with a friend of mine, Nick Alanin, and we flew in this airplane, and we flew over glaciers, and I tried to shoot photographs of everything outside the plane, but it's better inside my head. Like I can see where the sky opened up and shined down on this like huge melting glacier, and it was green, and I looked out the window and there's Meandering River, and we were fishing, and I said, look at, there's still bears down there. And like that stuff moves me. That stuff is like, man, it's grail. I just love, like, that's the privileges that we get, is we can leave home and we can always come back, right? We get to come back home too. Like this is what we're really doing, is we can live other places. We can live in California, and we can go wherever we go, but we always get to come home, and at least we have some place that we know, whether your umbilical cord's planted there, or, you know, or if you're like just, you know, you could have your home, your people, your everything, you know, your soul food, you know. I like that. Anyway, that's
amazing. Thank you. Any other questions? All right. Well then.
Hi there. David,
Hi.
great to see you.
Good to see you.
David, this is a question for you. Being so rooted.
That wasn't part of the deal.
Put you on your toes. Being so rooted institutionally here in Phoenix, how does a fair like this affect the trajectory of art in the Southwest?
I think that I could answer that question from a couple of different, you know, places. I think a lot of the artistic traditions from the Southwest, particularly the indigenous creative traditions, have been undervalued for a long time. I think, Tony, you alluded to that. So it's exciting for me to have an event like this that creates heat or a spotlight around those traditions because they are so exciting. Phoenix is now the fifth largest city in the United States. It's growing very quickly, so it stands to reason that an event like this would be happening. Of course, everything happens when it's meant to happen. I really believe that. But I think that this is giving a kind of focus to a lot of the things that have been happening in Phoenix creatively for a long time. The Herd has been around for almost 100 years. But there are other great institutions here and galleries that are doing such important work, and of course, wonderful artists. So I think it helps to elevate the profile of the city and the area and the work and the things that are happening here. Well, then I'm just going to, if there are no more questions, I just want to ask one more question of each of you, which is, what's next? Melissa?
Well, my what's next is just keep weaving. I mean, I have a lot of, those ideas are still stacked up in my mind, so I'm just crossing them off, one at a time. So I have a 1.5-year-old boy and a 4-year-old girl who's about to turn 5, which is the age I learned to weave. So, she's my look into the future of, where Navajo weaving is going to go. And so, hopefully, my kids will be the carriers of the information. And like I said, I'm just a vessel for the information that, is Navajo weaving to go forward. And I just, hope that my children can move forward with it as well.
Thanks, Melissa. Breeze? What's next for you?
Vacation, probably.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, it has been a long journey, and I do plan to take a little bit of a break. Not too long of a break, but what I do have coming up right after this is another museum who I won't name yet. We're in conversation for a interior mural project in another part of the country, so we'll be having that conversation real soon. And also in conversation with a public art project in a small city called Kagawa in Japan. So hopefully end of the year. And also back in the studio. Yeah.
Fantastic. And Tony, you have the last word.
Okay. Well, let's see. Lots of fun stuff. I fill my calendar, mainly with distractions. And where can I go to escape working? I've got a show coming up in August in Santa Fe, New Mexico, with Owens Gallery. I took last year off, but this year I'm in the studio working. I've got, maybe 20 paintings started, and I'll be lucky to get 12 or 14 of them done for the exhibition. So that's August 16th in Santa Fe at my gallery, Owens, or Nathaniel Owens Gallery. If you have not been out to the fair and you came to this lecture directly, go check out the booth that I curated. That's right here in the fair, and it's fantastic, and you're all gonna love it. It's nothing like I orchestrated it, but this is it's called Modernism in the Desert, and there's like all of the key, mainly indigenous artists. So you've got people like Fritz Scholder, and you've got Charles Loloma and Lloyd Kiva-New. You've got the White Hogan Workshop with a strong focus on Kenneth Begay. There are ceramics works by Rose Cabot. There are the Shires, Edwin and Mary Shire, Paulo Soleri, Dennis Namkena. It goes on with the artist Hopid. And there's a little bit of selection of everybody in there that represents this vernacular, where if you're from Phoenix, and you know the history of the art and the movements and the key figures who were vital to the arts of this area, it's fantastic. It's one of the largest kind of gathering of work by Kenneth Begay. There's a chess set there. There's like all of these things. A lot of that stuff is not for sale. Some of it is. But there's Ed Mel, like 2 really amazing Ed Mels. Go see them. They're phenomenal. So it's everybody that's focused, from the 50s through the 80s. Go see that. Above and beyond that, it's working, painting, mentoring, and I'll pick up a new project. And when I find like a weekend I escape, I go to my hometown in Gallup, New Mexico to eat stew. I'll go to Italy to go eat fish, and New York to go eat Japanese fried chicken. So there you go.
Can we have a round of applause for these great artists and people?